Well, isn't it always such a pleasure to learn from Christine? We're so happy that she got the opportunity to share with us today. And if you enjoyed what you were learning from Christine, you should come back next week because we're going to get to hear a part two from her as we dig further into the Open Generation study. If we've never met before, my name is Daniel Copeland, and I serve as the Associate Vice President of Research for Barna Group. And we're going to transition now into learning a little bit more about the Open Generation, how teens around the world relate to Jesus. As David was able to describe earlier, and as you've probably seen some of the stats, this is a massive study. It's a study that swept across the entire globe, and we were able to learn from these incredible teenagers in all these different unique places around the globe. And today I want to share with you some of the findings of all teenagers, but I also specifically want to focus on Asia Pacific and some of the incredible movements that are happening in this region of the world. It's such a pleasure to be able to share with you guys. I've got friends in the audience today from Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, who I got to meet years ago when we did the Connected Generation. So it's so exciting to be able to come back to you guys with new findings about today's teenagers. This study got the incredible opportunity to learn about Jesus, the Bible, and impact. And I want to offer us one thought before we jump into Jesus. When we did our first global study a few years ago, I had the really cool opportunity to spend some time with an amazing thinker named Mark Sayers, who's out of Melbourne, Australia. And he has this incredible perspective on some of the dissonances, some of the divisiveness of why we are experiencing some of the nuances of Christian culture today, some of the hypocrisies that Christine was just speaking to. And in his book, Disappearing Church, he offers this really great glimpse of we have offered the mirage that we can have community without commitment, faith without discipleship, and the kingdom without the king. That we've offered as a church for younger generations this disconnect that maybe we've told them you can have a community without commitment, you can have faith without discipleship, and we could even build the kingdom without the king, but that's not actually the image of the world that Christ has offered us. And that's not exactly what we have leaned into or should be leaning into as a global expression of the Christian faith. And so the data I want to share to you today is going to help to answer the question, how do we bridge the gap between affiliation and commitment? So affiliation would be, I identify as a Christian, and commitment would be, I have committed to following Christ. So let's take a look at our first bit of data here. So across the globe, we measured this consistent gap between affiliating with Christianity and being committed to following Jesus. So, for example, in the bottom left of your screen, you're seeing that half of teenagers in our study identify as Christian, 52%, but only 22% of Christian teens have personally made a commitment to following Christ. And in all the different countries we studied in Asia Pacific, between Australia, Indonesia, Korea, the Philippines, Taiwan, New Zealand, Malaysia, we see this gap. We see this disconnect between I affiliate, I call myself a Christian, maybe I pop into church every once in a while, and I believe that I'm following Christ. It's a really kind of pesky, kind of sad disconnect. And that's what I want to bring to you guys today. I want us to think about how are we as Christian leaders around the globe bridging this between it's more than just affiliating, more than just raising your hand. It's actually committing. It's actually being a part of a movement. And the first thing I want to share with you guys is that Christian teens around the globe are really concerned about seeing that their faith connects with the world. And so 68%, for example, say, I want to find a way that follows Jesus that connects with the broader culture I live in. The same percentage say, I want to be a Christian without separating myself from the broader culture around me. Just think about those two statements for a second. So I want to follow Jesus, and I want my relationship to Jesus to bring me closer to culture, to bring me as a part of the world. But I also don't want my relationship with the church, being a Christian, to disconnect me. Our faith should connect to the world. It should be a living, breathing expression within the world. And Christian teens are excited to see the church keep the priorities Jesus intended. They're excited to live out that mission. And so maybe the question for us to start with is, what about Jesus connects with teens? When they think about Jesus, David got to share a little bit about this. What is it about Jesus that really excites them? What are they leaning into? And we see this really beautiful emotional portrayal of Jesus around the globe. So on the far right there, or far left, you're seeing, we asked teenagers, what are some of your favorite attributes of Jesus? And we made sure that all of the attributes we allowed them to select from were biblical. And we told them to pick five. And the most consistent five characteristics of Jesus that teenagers are drawn towards are that he offers forgiveness. He forgave those who wronged him. He's compassionate, a teacher, and a miracle worker. And across the Asia Pacific countries we studied, you get to see these amazing characteristics pop up. For example, offering forgiveness was the number one thing that Christian teens in Australia love about Christ. It's the same in Korea, New Zealand, Philippines, and Taiwan. Whereas, for example, in India, the fact that Christ is part God is really important to teenagers. In Indonesia, it's Christ's compassion that draws them closer. And we can take these things and learn about, wow, these are the things. If Christian teens today are living like Christ, this is the things they want to portray. Here are the things that they're excited about. So how are we going to lead them into that? How are we going to share this with them? Well, we have to realize that teens do want to learn about Jesus, but there's an overwhelming amount of information in the world today. There's an overwhelming amount of noise in culture in an incredibly connected time in our world, the information age. There's plenty of places to learn, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a teenager is seeing these things as trustworthy. So we gave teens a variety of options and said, if you want to learn about Jesus, who or what would you consider a trustworthy source? And that dark kind of greenish color is trustworthy going across the bottom there. For example, 61% of teens, this is all teenagers, not just Christians, say that the Bible is a trustworthy place to learn about Jesus, compared to the least trustworthy option was seen as social media. And notice how all the digital options we presented teens with, even Christian radio, an online Christian influencer, the internet, YouTube, social media, they are all considered the least trustworthy places for a teen to learn about Christ. The places that they actually really want to learn about Christ are in relationship. Family member, a pastor, a priest, a church leader, a Christian, a friend. These are the places they see that if they wanted to learn about Christ, if they're going to learn about Christ, it's going to happen in relationship. But in the middle of this data towards the top, there's also a problem. There's a problem that 52% believe that they themselves are a trustworthy source to learn more about Jesus. And we have to be wary of that as church leaders, that people today, because they are so overwhelmed with information, they actually turn inward rather than turning outwards towards relationships. They believe that they can guide themselves and that they can have all the right answers. And while it's important for a teenager to trust themselves and learn their own identity, we also want to be working in relationship with them such that they can come into deeper relationship with Christ and the church body. So I want to now turn to what happens when we make that relationship, when we are in relationship with teens and they are in relationship with Christ. Well, David shared earlier about this definition we used of committed Christians. This is the 22%, the 1 out of 5 teenagers in the world today who are identifying as Christian and say they have a personal relationship with Jesus. And that's compared to the 30% of teenagers who are nominal Christians. That means that they identify as Christian, but they don't say that they are following Jesus. And I want to give you 5 things that these committed Christians are experiencing in the world today that is making their life different, that is making a real difference in the world around them. And the first is relevance. There's almost no more important topic in the next generation than relevance. Is Christianity relevant? Is learning about Jesus and the scriptures relevant to the world? And what we see is that when a teenager is committed to Christ, they say things like, my relationship with Christ brings me deep joy and satisfaction, that Jesus speaks to me in a way that is relevant to my life. And they also see that worship is a lifestyle, not just an event. They're experiencing this overlap of my faith and my life are not 2 different things. They are one thing and they are relevant to each other. These things are all one. And that's something that committed Christians are experiencing disproportionately to nominal Christians. Only 28% of nominal Christians, so people who just identify as Christian but aren't committed to Jesus, only 28% of them say that their relationship with Christ is bringing them joy. Only 26% of them say that Jesus speaks to a way that is relevant. And only 1 in 4 of them are saying that worship is a lifestyle, not just an event. They're disconnected. The other thing that committed Christians are experiencing is community. So we gave them a variety of ways to describe their relationship with the community that they are a part of. And you see that disproportionately committed Christians say things like, this community matters to me. I feel comfortable here. I expect to be a part of this community for a long time. I know people here. I'm satisfied with this community. Whereas nominal Christians, they actually look more similar to people outside of Christianity when they're not in that relationship. So think about that, for example. A Christian who is not in relationship with Jesus is actually having the same experience of community as people who are not even Christians themselves. So it's not just affiliation, it's the commitment that makes a difference within community. The third thing that committed Christians are experiencing is they're experiencing mission today. So among committed Christians, 71% say, I want to see Jesus reflected. I want others to see Jesus reflected in me through my words and my actions. 62% of them are excited about the mission of the church in today's world. Feel that they have a responsibility to share their religious beliefs with others, compared to only about less than 1 in 4, 1 in 5 nominal Christians. It's that these nominal Christians, they don't necessarily see the mission of the church today. They don't see what their faith may have to offer the world. Committed Christians are also, this is the fourth idea, they're living purposefully and they're feeling purpose in their life. So they're more likely to say things like, God designs each person with a unique calling in their life. 72% of them say, I want to use my unique talents and gifts to honor God. And they also say that my church around me is doing a good job of helping me understand my calling. So they're living with things connected. They're seeing the overlap. They're reaping of the fruits of the relationship that they've committed to. And the last thing is that they are making an impact. So 51% of committed Christians say that they are very motivated to do something about injustices in society. They're not comfortable with injustices or wrongs in society today, and they're committed to doing something about it. They're also incredibly more likely to recognize the fact that Jesus was passionate about justice, that Jesus was advocating for change in his time. So committed Christians are in making an impact. They want to make an impact. They want to be a part of the world and making it a better place. And so I want to wrap up this data presentation with a great teaching from Christ from Matthew 5:13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And Christ is trying to describe us as Christians that we're the salt of the earth. We're the thing keeping the earth flavorful, that we're extending the long life of the earth. But if we lose our saltiness, if we are just stuck in affiliation and not leading people into commitment, how can we be made salty again? How can we be a part of change in our lifetime, change in the church's lifetime? Thanks so much for learning about teens with me today. It's really, really a pleasure to be with you guys, and excited for us to continue our journey today. I'm going to transition to us learning from some teenagers themselves about the relationship and experiences they've had with Christ. Thanks so much for joining us.